Hi, I'm Sarah Clark with Disability Counseling Institute. Thanks for joining me today. I'm going to speak about what the signs are, what people notice if a person is either in the very early stages of adjustment to a disability or is struggling with their adjustment to disability. Many people ask these kinds of questions because they want to know whether it's a loved one, a friend, a client that they're working with. How do you know when somebody's struggling? What's expected? What's the norm? How do we know when an intervention of some kind, whether that be counseling or some other kind of self-help support group, anything like that would be recommended. So I'm going to talk about some of the most common identifiable behaviors, thoughts, and emotions involved in difficulty with adjustment to disability. One of the main ones that I think everybody experiences in the beginning stages of their disability, or that can be prolonged if the person is not adjusting well to their disability, is the tendency to isolate themselves and limit their activities. And this will look very different for different people because it'll be based on their interests, based on their social interactions, and based on what their typical activities were prior to the disability. But consider what you know about the person and what changes have there been. So it's not uncommon for a person to just limit activities to certain times of day, certain frequencies, only do activities under certain circumstances, all to adjust to what works best for their disability and what they figured out at that point. So a common example of this would be a person with a vision loss that is impacted most significantly during dim light or at night would not accept invitations to anything that was late in the day. They would not typically leave the house if it was dim or dark out. Even sometimes during very cloudy days, they would avoid going out, avoid doing certain things. And this is a sign of somebody who is struggling to adapt or hasn't learned the skills yet to adapt. Because once the necessary equipment, tools, skills are provided, a person with a visual impairment should be able to be equally independent no matter what level of lighting or what level of vision they have at that time. But it is very common for people to limit their activities. Sometimes they will isolate themselves and limit who they spend time with. Sometimes because they don't want people to know about their disability, or sometimes it's because certain people have responded more effectively than others and provided the kind of support that they're looking for. And rather than letting people know what it is that they need from them, they'll just avoid those people and those interactions to simplify. Another common trait or common sign to watch out for is when people lose hope. They will very often think that certain goals, certain plans, dreams for their future are no longer possible because the disability will prevent that. And this is a extremely important one to pay attention to, because when people lose hope for an extended amount of time, usually other things follow, like depression. So if you've identified that you or somebody that you are working with, somebody that you care about, has lost their hope as a result of their disability, this is a sign to recommend some kind of support to them. Other common habits, common thought processes involve being self-deprecating, making fun of themselves, putting themselves down, calling themselves names, anything that helps them try to cope with the negative things that they're feeling about themselves. Sometimes people will limit what they do into the point of being completely dependent upon others, or they'll go to the opposite end of the spectrum and they will try to do everything independently, whether or not it's safe. And either end of the spectrum isn't healthy, because you want to get to a point of having independence, and as much independence as you possibly can, but by doing things safely, by doing things in an adaptive way that allows for independence, not continuing to try to do things in an unsafe way to foster that independence. Other traits might be extreme stress, trying to plan everything out, figure out every scenario of how things could happen. That's very common with an adaptation or adjustment to disability in the first few weeks or months. And again, it can be prolonged if the person is very much struggling with their disability and isn't receiving the kind of support that they need. But those are just a few of the most common, but there are many other factors. And the best thing that you can do to find out if somebody is struggling, if they're having a hard time, whether it's a newly acquired disability or something they've been living with for a while, is to just ask how they feel about it. Ask how they feel about their level of independence, ask how they feel about their abilities, ask them what limitations they perceived so that you can determine whether those are realistic or based on misconceptions and misperceptions. Ask them how they feel about other people with that same disability type, because oftentimes people who view others with that disability type prior to them becoming disabled will internalize that perception, all of those stigmas, all of those stereotypes they will put on themselves. And so if they viewed people with their particular disability type as helpless, pitiable, sad, dependent, any of those things, that's how they're going to be feeling about themselves. And it's extremely harmful, because if you feel like you're not good enough or not good as you used to be, and you have a permanent disability, it's very hard to move to a place of acceptance. It's very hard to want to learn the skills and adaptations that you need to learn to live your best life. So ask those questions, find out what a person's struggling with, and pay attention to what you notice, because there are a lot of resources out there, whether they be courses or books or other kinds of self-help materials, or more structured options like support groups and disability adjustment counseling. All of these things are available, and it will help the person to be able to process it with somebody that understands what they're going through. It's also not uncommon for family members, loved ones, spouses to experience their own adjustment issues to their loved one's disability. So don't hesitate if you're noticing that a person that is not the identified person with the disability, but somebody else surrounding them is struggling. There are support options for them as well. So reach out, find the resources that you need. A disability does not have to have a negative impact on your life. You just have to learn to adapt and accept and thrive. Thank you.